The Earth has decided it's done with warm weather and plunged straight into a new ice age. Global temperatures are nosediving with no signs of stopping. Even the news anchor looks like he's auditioning for the next Frozen movie, trying to keep it together while shivering on live TV. He urges everyone not to lose hope, promising that the government hasn't forgotten them. Sure, just like that time they said it'd only take 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Just then, there's a knock at Han Feng's door. A familiar voice calls out his name. When he opens it, he finds Hyona standing there, shaking like a leaf in a snowstorm. Before Han Feng's can ask what in the ice age she's doing out in the cold, she jumps at him and kisses him like they're in some cheesy rom-com. Han Feng's pulls back, his brain doing gymnastics trying to figure out what's going on. Hyona, channeling all the drama of a K-drama lead, declares that she's realized he's the only one she truly loves. To prove it, she grabs his hand and presses it to her chest, daring him to feel her heartbeat. Han Feng's, now blushing like a teenager caught with a love letter, tries to tell her how much her words mean to him. But before he can finish, she shushes him and tells him to just close his eyes. And like a guy who's watched too many romance movies, he does. Bam! The door crashes open, and Han Feng's is suddenly on the floor, bleeding out. Talk about a date going south. As Han Feng's lies there, fading fast, Hyona casually asks the intruder if he's finished the job. The guy, who clearly skipped the empathy lessons, says she knew this was coming. The world's gone to hell, so what's one less guy in the mix? He starts rummaging through Han Feng's stuff, looking for anything useful. Meanwhile, Han Feng's, who's quickly realizing he should have stayed in bed, curses Hyona for her betrayal. Just as he's about to punch his ticket to the afterlife, he spots a distant golden light. Reaching out, he hopes it's the way to heaven, but the light gets brighter, almost blinding him. Suddenly, Han Feng's wakes up in his own bed, gasping for air. After what feels like 30 minutes of soaking up the sun like a cat, he checks the date. It's June 28th, a couple of weeks before the apocalypse that was supposed to end him. Somehow, he's been given a do-over, a second chance to avoid being backstabbed. But this time, things are different. For starters, his hand is glowing red like a malfunctioning Christmas light, and it's not going away. Just when he starts to wonder if he's losing it, he sneezes and whoa! The red glow changes to green and starts expanding like it's got a mind of its own. Han Feng's panics as light beams shoot from his hands. He decides that science probably can't explain this one, unless it's got a really good sense of humor. Exhausted, he flops onto the sofa, wondering what in the world is going on with his hands. It's like he's living in one of those Manhwa stories where the main character wakes up with crazy powers. Curious and a little freaked out, Han Feng's grabs a butcher knife, hoping for some kind of reaction. Nothing. His stomach growls, reminding him that apocalypse or not, he's still gotta eat. He checks the fridge, empty of course, but there's a jar of roasted soybeans left over from before everything went to hell. As he picks up a soybean with his glowing hand and pops it into his mouth, a strange blast occurs, and suddenly there's a bean sprouted in his mouth. Yep, he just turned dinner into a garden. Instead of just filling his stomach, it fills him with energy, and the green light disappears. Han Feng's decides he's got to figure out what's going on with these weird powers. But first things first, he needs supplies before the end of the world. Walking through the busy market, surrounded by people who have no idea what's coming, he thinks about the wild events of the past day. Red glow, green glow, sprouting soybeans. It's like he stumbled into the strangest cooking show ever. Just as he's trying to make sense of it all, he hears someone call his name. He turns around and sees Hyona, smiling like they just bumped into each other by accident. She asks if he's out shopping too, and Han Feng's wonders if this meeting is really a coincidence, or if things are about to get even weirder. Hyona, the goddess of Han Feng's dreams for years, well, more like nightmares now, has always been the center of his universe. Our boy did everything to make her happy, even though deep down, he knew he was just her backup plan. But hey, he never thought she'd go so far as to get him killed. That's a bit extreme, even for a fallback guy. Han Feng's tries to calm his racing heart, reminding himself that it's not time for revenge just yet. He's got more pressing matters, like stocking up on supplies for the upcoming apocalypse. Just as he's lost in thought, Hyona snaps him out of it, asking why he's spacing out and mentioning she's been calling his name for a while. He slaps on a smile, hiding the storm inside, and apologizes, saying she looks especially beautiful today, which made him lose track of time. She laughs, telling him to stop being so smooth and asks since when he got this slick. She then suggests they do some shopping together now that they've run into each other. But Chad, Han Feng's isn't the same guy she used to manipulate. He politely declines, walks off, and says he can't today, leaving her standing there, probably wondering if she's in the wrong reality show. As he walks away, he thinks, nice try, but this guy isn't your personal ATM anymore. Han Feng's heads to the WDMA Supercenter in Waldemar Shopping Plaza, the biggest and most well-stocked supermarket in the East region. This place is a fortress of groceries and survival gear. He recalls how it got cleaned out overnight when the Ice Age hit in the future, and no one ever figured out who did it. As he pushes a cart through the aisles, he knows he needs to stock up as much as possible before the apocalypse strikes. He glances at the apocalypse survival guide on his phone. His shopping list is longer than a fantasy novel. Food, winter clothes, medicine, daily necessities, fuel, you name it, he needs it. But then he checks his balance and realizes he's more broke than he thought. Just as he's about to panic, a notification pops up on his phone. His credit card evaluation has been approved, making him eligible for a loan up to 168,800 yuan. That's like finding a treasure chest in the middle of a desert. A sly grin spreads across his face as he starts planning. Why pay back loans when the world's about to end? He thinks, feeling like a genius. Meanwhile, Lee Hyona is still fuming, kicking a can down the road while cursing him under her breath. She's thinking, how dare he refuse me? Pathetic loser doesn't even own a car. She's done being nice to him. Just then, she hears car horns and turns to see Han Feng stepping out of a fancy car. Her eyes widen with curiosity, and she asks if it's his car. He replies coolly, yeah, just got it. My dad's been doing well in the US, wired me some cash. I just dropped him off at the airport. Instantly, her demeanor changes. The crocodile tears start flowing as she apologizes for asking him to go shopping without knowing he was busy with his dad. She explains she thought he was ditching her because he seemed distant earlier. Han Feng's pulls her close, smirking, and says, you're a silly girl. Why would I ever ditch you? You're way too important to me. She eats it up, suggesting they have dinner and watch a movie today. She wants to get to know him better. Or so she says, but he's too busy unloading his car to pay her much mind. Lee Hyona, curious, asks why he bought so much stuff. Han Feng's brushes it off, saying it's nothing special, just some things he likes. He even adds that he got her a present. She assumes it's a birthday gift and leaves, smiling back at him, thinking she's still got him wrapped around her finger. But as she walks away, Han Feng's watches her with a grin, thinking, she should look forward to it, alright? He can't let her find out about his stockpile, though. That's his golden ticket to surviving the apocalypse. And once the world ends, she'll get what's coming to her, especially after what she did to him. He's actually starting to look forward to the apocalypse, if only to see her face when it all goes down. Fast forward to Thursday, June 29th. Han Feng's knows July 15th is the day the snowstorm will hit. Heavy snow, temperatures dropping to -20 degrees Celsius. Over the next month, it'll get even worse, with temperatures plummeting to -70 degrees Celsius, turning the world into a giant freezer. He's got to stock up on enough food, but in a way that won't tip off his nosy neighbors. Sensitive supplies must be moved at night, like a ninja in the shadows. One by one, his preparations are ticking off the list. By July 14th, his house is a fortress ready for the big freeze. But there's still one thing left to figure out. What's up with these weird new powers he's been noticing? That's next on his to-do list. The apocalypse can wait. He's got some superpowers to master first. Our boy Han Feng's was facing the impending Ice Age apocalypse with all the determination of a guy who just realized his freezer was full of nothing but ice cream and frozen veggies. Sitting at the table, he stared down at a plate of freshly cooked soybeans, which he had somehow grown using his new and utterly unpredictable plant powers. It was a strange feeling, kind of like discovering you can suddenly juggle but only with one hand, and only on Tuesdays. Han took a deep breath. All right, taste test time, he muttered, trying to sound more confident than he felt. He popped a soybean into his mouth, chewing slowly. It wasn't half bad, and considering the world was turning into a giant icebox, having a renewable food source felt like winning the lottery, if the prize was beans. This little victory told him one thing: his power could actually be useful. But he needed to figure out how to control it, and that was going to take more than just wishing on a star. Standing in front of the fridge, he realized he couldn't live on soybeans alone. Sure, they were nutritious, but even in an apocalypse, variety was the spice of life. Time to branch out, our hero decided, glancing around his kitchen like it held the secrets of the universe. Hours later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Han woke up feeling like he'd been hit by a truck. His head pounded, his body felt like jelly, and to top it off, his kitchen looked like a tornado had passed through. It didn't take a genius to figure out that his plant powers came with a hefty price, like a bad hangover, but instead of cheap booze, it was from overdoing the supernatural gardening. Sitting at the dining table again, he munched on his trusty soybeans, replaying the chaos in his mind. Before blacking out, he had tried growing various plants. Some didn't do a thing, some sprouted like magic, and others, well, they exploded into something that looked suspiciously like charcoal briquettes. It was like playing the world's most dangerous game of gardening roulette. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't replicate his earlier success. Come on, Han, focus, he told himself, trying to regulate his breathing like some kind of plant-wielding Zen master. But instead of enlightenment, all he got was another blackout. When he came to, frustrated and holding a piece of broccoli, Han tried to make sense of his powers. Maybe the trick was all in his head? He folded his legs, imagining himself as one with nature. Suddenly, a green light appeared in his hand, and Han's eyes lit up. All right, we're getting somewhere, he thought, trying to channel the power into a piece of meat. But the meat just sat there, unimpressed. He figured maybe his powers were vegetarian. But then, he remembered the red light from earlier and decided to give it a shot. Closing his eyes, he focused on the red light, which flared up in his hand and transferred to the meat. The meat started to burn, and he tossed it aside like it was a hot coal. At first, Han thought the red light was just for cooking, but then it hit him, it wasn't just cooking. It was breaking things down like some kind of reverse growth. His mind raced as he wondered if the green light was for building things up while the red light broke them down. Feeling like a mad scientist, he combined the two lights and bam! The meat puffed up in a mild explosion. Han stared in shock as the soybeans he was holding vanished, seemingly absorbed into the meat. Examining it, he found it looked, felt, and even smelled like real meat, but there was something oddly fresh about it. Despite the string of failures, Han decided to shelve this mystery for later. Today hadn't been a complete waste. If I can master this, I'll be king of the apocalypse, he thought, getting lost in grand fantasies of ruling over a frozen wasteland. But reality hit him like a snowball to the face. Food alone wouldn't be enough. He was defenseless out here. Panic set in as he realized he needed a weapon like yesterday. He quickly tidied up, shoving his weird science project back in the fridge, and headed out. It's happening, Han thought, his mind racing as he walked down the street. The forecast said temperatures would drop to 45 below within the week, and our boy needed a gun. But buying one wasn't exactly legal, and Han wasn't exactly rolling with the underworld crowd. Just when things seemed hopeless, he overheard some guy bragging about his connections in the construction world, with millions riding on every project. Han spotted the man who was talking to someone else and coming his way. The guy was going on about how he knew Lao Wang from the Shigong Lida group, practically his big brother or so he claimed. Han squinted at the guy, recognizing him as someone he'd seen around before. The man offered him a cigarette, proudly declaring that it was a gift from his big brother. Han couldn't help but notice the man's over-the-top fashion sense. Around here, they called him Homeless Joe. Li Zi, affectionately known as Brother Li around town, is a jack-of-all-trades with a knack for contracting projects and a reputation for knowing everyone. One day, a man offers him a cigarette, but Brother Li declines, sticking with his trusty Huazi brand because other smokes make him cough like he's got a pet parrot stuck in his throat. The man, curious, asks what he's up to. Li Zi, as casual as a cat napping in the sun, says he's working on a project for his big brother who's promised him a sauna visit. Despite not having a real job, Li Zi always looks busy, claiming on the phone to his big brother that he just sealed a $20 million deal and now has another $10 million one lined up. Our boy Han Feng's, watching from the sidelines, thinks, hey, this guy might have the connections I need. So he approaches Li Zi with a hearty, Brother Li, and mentions it's been ages since they last met. Li Zi looks at him like he's trying to remember if he's met a ghost or a long-lost cousin. Han Feng's chuckles, reintroduces himself, and tries to jog Li Zi's memory. Li Zi, who's been busier than a one-armed wallpaper hanger, apologizes for his forgetfulness and asks how he can help. Han Feng's leans in and whispers his request. Li Zi's eyes widen. A weapon! He's taken aback and asks why in the world Han Feng's needs one. Han Feng spins a yarn about an old man who spat on him while he was biking to work. After a confrontation and a scuffle, the man and his goons gave Han Feng's a rough time. Now Han Feng's feels humiliated and wants a weapon for self-defense. Li Zi, looking more concerned than a cat stuck in a bathtub. Says he has connections but isn't into anything shady. Han Feng's reassures him it's just for personal safety, not a criminal enterprise. Li Zi agrees to help, saying he'll call his big brother. He adds with a grin that if his Panamera wasn't in the shop, he'd drive Han Feng's himself. Han Feng's reassures him he's got his own ride, so off they go. As they drive, Li Zi admires Han Feng's SUV like a kid in a candy store and asks about the cost. Han Feng's casually mentions around 700,000, and Li Zi nods approvingly, saying it's a good deal. He then snaps a selfie and tells Han Feng's to turn left at the next intersection. The caption? Still figuring out this new SUV. It's a wild ride. At a bonfire, a group of guys are complaining about the weather, which has gone from summer to winter faster than a bad haircut grows back. One of them notices Han Feng's and Li Zi and asks what's up. Li Zi casually mentions they're there to see Boss Lu about some business. Someone comments on the new SUV, and Li Zi casually drops the price of 700,000 like he's talking about his lunch order. Han Feng's thinks, wow, this guy's got guts. One man, clearly in a mood, calls Li Zi Big Mouth, and asks why they're there so late. Li Zi offers him a cigarette, but the guy's too busy for that. Li Zi points to Han Feng's and explains he's looking to buy a gun. Boss Lu, looking like someone just told him he's out of coffee, is surprised and says he expected something more exciting. He calls over Changzi, who throws a gun on the table and quotes a price of 6,000. Han Feng's, aiming for something a bit fancier, mentions he wants a gun with a scope. Boss Lu, clearly annoyed, goes off like a firecracker, saying they're not at a mall where you can pick and choose. It's only this short one, take it or leave it. Li Zi tries to calm things down and spins a ludicrous story about Han Feng's wife and 3 kids that aren't his. Boss Lu, now livid and cursing up a storm, calls it disgusting. Han Feng's, feeling awkward and relieved, is glad when Boss Lu finally agrees to arrange the sniper rifle, though it might take a few days. He thanks him, and Boss Lu orders Changzi to arrange a semi-auto and load him up with ammo, even offering the gun as a gift. Han Feng's, pretending to be an expert, warns about supply limits due to the weird weather and advises to stock up. Boss Lu nods, understanding the urgency. Li Zi says it's time to go, and Boss Lu, visibly annoyed, tells them to beat it. As they leave, Li Zi is pumped, saying how smoothly everything went and how his big brother could probably grant any wish today. Han Feng's, feeling grateful, says he'll grab some cigarettes on the way out. Li Zi laughs and says don't be ridiculous. He's just helping out because he likes to. But if Han Feng's insists, he should get him some Huazi cigarettes because other brands make him cough. He suggests 7 or 8 cartons should be enough. Once Han Feng's gets paid, Li Zi promises a sauna trip to celebrate. Han Feng's, tuning out the chatter, mentally checks off his survival supplies and weapons, preparing for what he believes will be the early days of an apocalypse. He's determined to master his survival skills, especially food. Lost in thought, he slips on the snow. Li Zi rushes over, looking as concerned as a mom on a field trip, and asks if he's okay. Han Feng's winces in pain, clutching his leg, and hands over his car keys, asking for a hospital trip. Li Zi, flustered and admitting he doesn't have a driver's license, suggests they just walk it off. Han Feng's, still in pain, insists on a taxi and promises to cover the fare. In the office, a woman tells Jiyeon to see her later and reminds her to handle the night shift. Jiyeon wishes her to be careful in the snowy weather. Looking out the window, Jiyeon notices the snow piling up like a bad haircut. A phone beeps, and a voice asks the head nurse to come to the hall since they're short-staffed. Jiyeon quickly responds, saying she'll be there right away. Our boy Han Feng sits in the doctor's office, staring at the X-ray like it's a puzzle he's determined to solve. The doctor breaks the news. Yep, a stable fracture in his right tibia. He'll set the bone and keep Han Feng's under observation for an hour before he can get his meds. Han Feng sighs, thinking, of course, this had to happen right before the apocalypse hits. Great timing, universe. As Han Feng settles into the bustling waiting area, Li Zi swings by to say he's off to handle some deals. He tells Han Feng's to call if he needs anything. Han Feng's nods, then looks around at the chaotic hospital scene. The place is packed. Victims of accidents from the surprise blizzard and plummeting temperatures. Emergency beds line the hallways like an uncomfortable game of musical chairs. Han Feng's wonders how long it'll be before he gets his meds. His gaze lands on Jiyeon, the head nurse, who's busy attending to a patient. A nurse asks her to check bed 5's wounds. Jiyeon, looking calm and efficient, checks the patient's vital signs and gives instructions to administer another dose of glucose and epinephrine if needed. Han Feng's watches, a hint of blush on his face, thinking, wow, she's amazing, young, skilled, kind, and really pretty. But man, she's way too clueless about the creep sitting next to me. Speaking of creeps, a man next to Han Feng's calls out to Jiyeon. With a smile that could win an award, Jiyeon apologizes and says they're short-staffed, asking if she can come back later. The man, pretending to be in pain, secretly starts filming with his phone, ready to slide it between her legs for some unsavory pics. He asks her to check his back, pulling her closer and placing his hands on her waist. Jiyeon, clearly uncomfortable but smiling, says she's ticklish and suggests waiting for the resident physician. The man grabs her hips, pushing his luck. Suddenly, Han Feng's, using his crutch like a pro, smacks the man, sending him crashing to the ground. Han Feng's apologizes, saying it's his first time using a crutch. He then picks up the man's phone, which the guy yells not to touch. Han Feng's, seeing what's on the phone, realizes this guy is filming up Jiyeon's skirt. He shows the man the incriminating photos and threatens to call security, warning him that his face might end up all over the internet. The man, gritting his teeth, scrambles away. Jiyeon, looking puzzled, comments that the man's back pain seemed to disappear pretty fast. Han Feng's is dumbfounded, thinking, wow, people really can be this clueless. He shows Jiyeon the photos and explains what happened. Jiyeon is shocked, saying she didn't notice. Han Feng's hands over the phone, telling her to decide whether to wipe it or call the cops. He also advises her to be more vigilant. She thanks him, her smile returning, and mentions she noticed his injured ankle earlier. Han Feng's winces in pain. Jiyeon bandages his ankle and reassures him that it's all done and should feel better. Han Feng's thanks her, noting it doesn't hurt at all now. Jiyeon thanks him for his help and vows to deal with bad guys more firmly in the future. Han Feng's agrees and advises her to stay alert. A voice calls for Jiyeon, and she tells Han Feng's to come back in a week to get his ankle checked. He waves and agrees, feeling like he might not see her again, and heads out. The next day, a reporter interrupts a program with urgent news. Within 24 hours, every region in the country will experience heavy snow and a sharp drop in temperatures. Reports from Egypt, Dubai, and the Amazon basin show temperatures plummeting worldwide. Experts from 46 countries are rushing to the UN to discuss this weather anomaly. They assure the public that this cold snap won't last long and urge everyone to follow local disaster warnings and avoid panic buying. Han Feng's, sipping wine and shaking his head, thinks, sure, they're just feeding us fluff to keep us calm. If I hadn't already been through this once, I might buy their story. But this time, I'm ready. He's stocked up on supplies, reinforced his house, and got the heating system sorted. Feeling confident, he takes another sip of wine. A notification dings, pulling him out of his wine-soaked reverie. He checks a group chat with messages from residents about the snow and weather. Among the chatter, a mysterious message catches his eye, warning that this snowstorm isn't just a freak of nature, but the beginning of an Ice Age apocalypse. Han Feng's raises an eyebrow, intrigued and wondering who this person is and how they know about the impending doom.
To be continued. If you want to watch the next part, then like and subscribe and let me know in the comment of what recap you want to watch next.